boys and girls, welcome to your third reading lesson for this week. So let's jump right into it. I have a question for you. Have you ever been in a conversation with a group of kids and you look over at your best friend and he looks, or she looks really mad? And for a moment you think, why is he mad or why is she mad? But then, because this is your best friend, you can think back over everything and say, oh, I bet I know what got him upset. That's what it means to be a best friend. You get the person. So maybe your friend gets up from the group and walks away, slamming the door, and everyone else thinks, what's going on with him or her? And some shrug and say, well, who knows? But you're his or her best friend. So you think, oh, I know. Boys and girls, today I want to teach you that when you're an expert on a character, you can understand your character like your best friend. You can think, why did he do that? Or why did she do that? And then you can even think of answers too. So in today's lesson, you guys are going to act as Franny's best friend, or if you want to think of it like a detective. I want you to question the things that Franny does. I want you to think, why did she do that? Or why did she say that? Our learning target for today is I can think about what characters say and do. In our last chapter, chapter 9, it ended with this traffic jam where the bus and all these people were stuck in, and Franny says that Mrs. Pellington is so mad that she doesn't even want to talk to anyone until the next day in a class meeting. And she calls it a fiasco. She says, I don't want to talk about this fiasco until tomorrow. Do you know what a fiasco is? Yeah, a fiasco means basically a complete failure. So Mrs. Pellington is calling this a complete failure. She probably isn't too happy about how the field trip turned out. Let's continue reading. We are on chapter 10. The second I walked into our house, my parents had their "You're in big trouble, young lady" faces on. I don't know how they already knew about the radio station visit. I never seen my dad so burning mad before in all of my life. He had his arms crossed and my mom had her hands on her hips. I didn't know what to do, so I just stood there, holding my briefcase, waiting for something to happen. You promised us you'd be on your best behavior. I was. Talking over a radio show was your best behavior? It was an emergency. Mr. Sanders was in trouble. It was not an emergency, and Mr. Sanders was not in trouble. He was too in trouble. He left the studio. Mr. Sanders left the studio because he went to the bathroom. Huh? The bathroom? I didn't even think of that. I had a very big trouble feeling. You were not thinking, Francis. My mom Francis'd me. I was in even bigger trouble than I thought. We are extremely upset with you, my father said as he began to pace. You caused an absolute mayhem, not just for the radio station, but for the entire town, my mother cried. Huh? The entire town? How in the whole wide world of America could that even be true? There are still traffic jams out there, my father said. I didn't know what the traffic jams had to do with anything. Maybe my parents were so mad that they decided to blame everything bad that happened on me. Do you know how long it took me to get home, my mother said, with her voice raised. How long? I asked. But when she didn't answer, I realized that it was a trick question, the kind you're not supposed to answer out loud. Where on earth did you get the idea that the polling station moved? This was an easy one. Mrs. Pellington told me that the election was canceled in all the schools. My father stopped pacing and faced me. He and my mother looked at each other confused. This news made them a little less angry, which meant I was not grounded for forever, teen. Probably just forever. What did she say exactly? My father wanted to know. My father only asked for exactly things when he thought I didn't have the facts straight. But I did have the facts straight. She exactly said something about how there would be no more school voting ever in the world. That it would only be in local theaters, I said. Now they looked even more confused. So I added, or something like that. But our town doesn't have a local theater, my mom said. Oh yeah, I said. I forgot that every time we wanted to see a play, we had to drive all the way to Morristown. Morristown wasn't local at all. So if our town doesn't have a local theater, how could anyone in our town vote there? My dad asked. Now I was stumpified. I don't know. I squinched my eyes closely together to try and remember exactly what Mrs. Pellington had been talking about. And just then, I felt some little memory starting to drizzle. A big ocean wave swelled inside my belly and up to my head as I maybe, possibly, perhaps remembered a tiny detail that must have fallen into one of my brain creases, which meant there was a chance that I maybe, possibly, perhaps wasn't paying the most carefulest attention to Mrs. Pellington. I was, however is a very grown-up word, paying the carefulest attention to note passing with Elliot. And that's when I had the big realization and looked up at my parents with the guilt of the world in my eyes. When Elliot and I started to pay attention, I thought Mrs. Pellington was talking about voting being moved from our school to the local theater, but she wasn't. She was probably still telling us the story she had started about her childhood. But because I wasn't paying attention so well, I thought that by the time I started to pay attention, she would have started a new story. I was in a worldwide canon of trouble. Do you know what kind of trouble you created for everyone? See what I mean? I shook my head no. That was the truth of the world. I really didn't know. Now my father started pacing again. Well, first of all, you gave out wrong information. The voting was at Chester Elementary. That's why you were on a field trip all morning, to get you out of the way for the early morning voting rush. Second of all, you had no business sitting at Mr. Sanders' desk. Third of all, you had no right to answer a phone that wasn't ringing in your own home. There was a huge traffic jam today because all the Chester people and all the Morristown people were heading towards the Morristown polling place. By the time the Chester people finally figured out that they were supposed to vote at your school, they almost missed their chance to vote in the proper district. You might have cost Mr. Meloy the opportunity to be our mayor. And he's the one you like. Oh, was all I could manage to say. The traffic jam was my fault. I felt terrible. I hadn't meant to do anything wrong. In fact, I meant to do the exact opposite of wrong. I was just trying to be an adult. Do you know what you're doing when you pass on information before getting the facts straight? My mom said. I shook my head no, again. You're starting rumors, she answered. Oh, that's a pretty kiddish thing to do, huh? Finally, a yes I could shake my head to. Then my dad had a very good idea. Let's go make dinner and we'll discuss things some more later. I followed them into the kitchen, where they turned on the news and guessed what the top story of the day was. Mrs. Frankly B. Miller nearly ruins it for the community. It felt terrible. I had a very heavy weight on my shoulders. That was definitely not the way I imagined hearing about myself on the radio. So at this point, let's think about why Franny went on the radio. First of all, she said that she thought Mr. Sanders was sent home. And then her mom and dad said, no, he was just in the bathroom. And then when her parents said, well, why did you share false information with people? And then it ended up causing this big traffic jam. Why did she say that she was giving out false information? Yeah, at first she thought that she heard it from Mrs. Pellington. And she also said that she just wants to be an adult. She was trying to be like a grown-up. So as we keep reading, I want you to think about why Franny does the thing she does, or why Franny says the thing she says. Chapter 11. My parents didn't seem to want my help in the kitchen, so I sat in the dining room and stared at my dad's old briefcase. I felt sad that my resume was still in there. It didn't even get the chance to see any of the exciting offices at the radio station. Come to think of it, neither did I. Come to think of it again, neither did anyone in my class. I was starting to realize that saving the day might have actually ruined it. What in the world was a person in my position supposed to do? Then I heard this on the radio. It's still unclear which way the election will go. It was a straight shot for Frank Malloy before Mrs. Frankly B. Miller steered our entire town in the wrong direction. I slumped down in my chair. For the first half of dinner, I thought maybe a miracle had occurred and my parents forgot about all the mess of today's events. They were laughing and talking about their day and something funny that my father's assistant did. But at the part about family news, my parents put their serious faces back on. Do you remember that conversation we had about emergencies? My dad said. I squinched my face to try and remember. Then I pressed my hands against my head so my memory would work, and vavoom. Yes, I said. What's an emergency? When there is a big accident or catastrophe, something you can tell an adult. Looking back, do you really think in your hearts of hearts there was an emergency in the radio station? I did not like where this was going. No. And looking back, my mother added, do you see how your actions affected the radio station and the entire community? Yes, I said, and a tear ran down my face. My parents didn't like when I cried. But even though they leaned closer and my mom even put her hand on my arm, they didn't say anything comforting. My dad fixed his face so it looked nice and professional at the same time. This was his speech face. I know that you want to be helpful, and we think that's a wonderful quality you have, but you need to know when you are helping and when you are creating more trouble, he said. I nodded, but he wasn't finished. I know that sometimes you think you know as much as adults. I looked up at my dad. That sounded exactly right. But even adults follow the rules. And you didn't follow the rules. When people tell you not to touch something, then everyone, adults included, respect that and they do not touch that something. Rules are there for a reason, my mom said. And when you go against the rules, you get yourself into trouble. That was true too. This was the second time in 2 months I got into trouble by breaking the same rule. For the next 2 nights, there will be no TV watching. Instead, we're going to let you use that time to think of a way to make things better, my dad said. And no playdates with Elliot next week, my mom told me. My eyes almost fell off my face. Why? So you'll have more time to think about what it means to break the rules, my dad said. That night when I was laying in bed trying to fix the entire world, more things leaked into my brain creases. When I was in the radio station and everyone was banging against the glass, they were not doing it to show excitement. They were trying to stop me. I thought they were being like umpires and telling me I was getting a home run and that Mr. Sanders was out. But they were just trying to tell me that I was saying the wrong thing to the entire planet of the world. That's when I got out of bed and clicked my dad's briefcase open. I took out my resume and very carefully put it in the garbage. And we're going to continue reading tomorrow. So now you're going to write a little bit about what Franny was saying and feeling. Just like if you see your best friend who's really sad and upset, you're going to think, why are they feeling that way? But since you're their best friend and you know them so well, you may just know. And you may think of ways that you can make them feel better. I put a spot on the worksheet where you can draw a picture of how Franny is feeling, and I'll also put a picture of Franny on there so you can know exactly what she looks like to help your drawing. So tomorrow we are going to finish Frankly Franny. I hope you have a wonderful day. Stay safe and healthy, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye guys!